Alright, so now that our darkest areas are finished, what we're going to do is we're going to work with the watercolor again, and but we're going to add a little bit more. I will say that this paper again is not made for water, so you can see already that it's kind of curling up a little bit at the edges. So what I do suggest is putting something down along some of your corners so they don't pull, like so they don't lift up as much. So I have my watercolor palette on the one side. I have an eraser actually down here in this other corner, and then I'm just letting these two kind of go for now. You can see that I have done this kind of gradient with my background, and if you choose to do something like that, that is absolutely okay. Like, I don't think I needed to fill in my whole background with black, so I wanted to kind of just leave it as a gradient. So if you do have a very dark background, that is something, again, you hopefully didn't paint it yet, but maybe you did, and that's fine. Or if you haven't and you want to just kind of do a gradient, you can as well. That would only work, obviously, if you have a super dark background. So just be aware of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on those other darker areas. So again, if I'm looking at my picture, you can see I have these areas like right in here on this side of the can, and again in some parts of the lid, but mainly, you know, really right there is one of these middle kind of spots. But I'm going to use the black watercolor to do this, and I am going to use a little bit more water this time. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to kind of have some water on my brush, and I'm going to take the black, get that, and I'm going to put it down in this spot. So just like if we were painting with watercolor, we would have water and we would have, you know, our color. So I'm going to use this now rather than just focusing on dipping straight through here. I can control it a little bit better, and then this way I also don't get too much water on my brush. So again, I'm going to leave that in the corner best as I can to help hold that down. So I'm going to take some of that color, and the first spot I'm going to work on is right down in here. It's actually a little bit too much, so my paper towel is hiding under my picture. So and I am going to go over those areas that I had first painted with the dark, just so I can make sure those combine there. You really don't want a lot of water on your brush though, because this paper will probably pill, and that would obviously be really bad. You also don't want a lot of water on your brush because it's also going to, you know, pull it up like you can see it's doing. So then I'm also going to come down here, come underneath. If you also happen to notice something that maybe you forgot to put in the first time with your darkest values, you can also add that in now as well. But hopefully just from doing the dark and having the light, you can actually start to see your picture looks, you know, starting to look like your black and white image. Again, you may not have it printed out, but hopefully you can start to see that it does look like, you know, what you were trying to go with at first. I actually forgot to bleach a spot on this. Oops. I need to make sure I do that. So again, I'm not focusing on anything with bleach today. I'm just focusing once again on just the dark. So I am going to come down here along the side. It probably gets cut off in the picture, but I'm going to come down here because this is also a really dark area. And so right now I'm trying to look to see if my wash that I created is dark enough, and it looks like it's not, so I am going to add a little bit more paint from my, there we go. So we're going to let the red show through a little bit But with the whole focus as you work with the watercolor today is you might possibly have something else that's kind of dark, but it's not pitch black, right? So like obviously this part of the can is pure black. So I wanted to paint that yesterday, paint full, you know, just straight black. But I do have these other areas that are dark, but they're not as dark obviously as black, but they're not really super light either. So I want to add those in. So that's basically what you're trying to look at today, is you're looking at, okay, what do I need to add in? What's going to be super important for my piece to have in there? And then how can I work that out basically. So while I am doing this, if I do notice my brush starts to get a little bit too dry, I do just dip it just slightly in the water and even a little bit with that paint. I definitely don't want to have too much of that for sure. And again, I'm using just the tip of my brush as I'm working. Making sure my brush is really clean and stiff does really help too. Like it's not my edges aren't really frayed with this one, so if they were, this would be a lot harder. So now I'm going to come down here. Oops. So that needs a little bit more water. There we go. So again, I'm focusing on this whole area, adding in those values that I see for that. And then if I need to fade it out, which I do, I'm just kind of cleaning my brush off a little bit. I'm wiping it on my hand right now, but I would wipe it on your paper towel if you have it. And then make that transition basically so it fades out into your paper color. So you can see how that along the corner over here matches now. So again, I did say that I did notice a couple things I forgot to do with some bleach, so I will be doing those, but definitely not today. That'll be saved for tomorrow for sure. And right now I'm also looking at right underneath, right down here. It's pretty dark, that's a lot of water. If you do notice that you have too much water on your brush, it's best to kind of just stop and wipe that off and just kind of start fresh again. It's a little bit safer than trying to make sure that you wipe all that paint off your brush. I'm going to let that sit actually now, because that is a lot of water right there. I don't want that. It's actually a little bit darker. So you can also, again, go back in, and if you maybe didn't get all your darks, again, you can, from yesterday, you can definitely do that again today. So I noticed another spot I forgot, right in between these two. See where it comes in. And I'm left with a black line right there. But then on this side of it, it kind of fades out, so I'm going to then get a little bit more water on my brush. And I'm going to work that line out, basically towards this one. So this is dry from yesterday, so what I can actually do, the nice thing is obviously water and watercolor work together, so you can basically re-wet that area. So if I need these lines to fade out like I do, I'm just working my brush right now right over top of that, and you can see it starting to fade out a little bit, which is perfect. I'm just being really careful though, because I don't want to make crazy lines as I'm trying that out. So definitely make sure that your brush is a little bit wet, not super wet, but just a little bit, and you'll be able to do that pretty well. There. So next place that I'm really looking at is I see a spot right over here I'm going to do. So again, same thing. Is it super dark like that? Is it kind of lighter? You know, what's kind of going on? And it's obviously basically right in between. So I had to add a little bit more water to my paint that was in my lid. It was getting a little dry, so now I'm going to come back in and work in that area. Combine these two. So it looks a little light, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint from the lid. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I might see if I need to add more right here or not. I'm probably going to need to, and it also looks like I definitely need to make my bleach thicker here. This is way too thin. So I am going to add in this line though, because it is kind of dark. Would help if my paper was not bubbling. So definitely as you're doing this, you can see how I kind of have to hold my paper down. You will probably need to do the same thing, just because this bleach, again, maybe not necessarily the bleach part, but from using the black, it's definitely, because you are adding water, it's definitely going to try to like lift up and pull up on you in places, so it will make painting a little trickier. So definitely hold down your paper if you can, just to make your life a little bit easier as you paint in those edges. The same thing I'm going to look at over here, and once again hold down my paper as best as I can, a little bit tight, and paint in those lines that I need to add in. There, and a little bit to the inside as well. You will want to be careful because, again, black will cover like our pencil line, so we don't have to worry about that, but the black doesn't really cover the bleach. It actually turns it into a gray color, obviously. So if you did happen to mess up on an area and you're thinking, oh, I can just cover it, just be really careful and cautious, because you will still see that bleach basically showing through. So now that that's a little bit more dry, I'm going to come back over top of that, over here with the second layer. Okay, I'm going to hold down my paper because it is bubbling pretty bad right there. And as I'm going over, I'm just going really slowly, and I'm working those lines, just kind of staying consistent with that. I'm not trying to go crazy there. And really using the tip of that brush is going to help out a lot. So I do have other couple areas that I'm going to do. So I'm going to work on this side right here.